I'm Tahlia Burton-Dos Santos. I am a United States Air Force veteran. I served for 6 years from 2008 to 2014 as a Chinese, a Pashto, and a French cryptologic linguist. That is a mouthful. That is a fancy word for a translator. I spent the majority of my time working with Pashto out of Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan, and I was supporting special operations missions and special forces units. So thank you very much. Thanks to everybody who is sounding off. I am so thrilled. I'm broadcasting here from the Mental Health Coalition handle today. And the Mental Health Coalition has been hosting one-to-one conversations about mental health all month long. It is Mental Health May. And we want to encourage people to open up and share what they're going through. We, when we have the courage to show up and to share our stories, we help end the stigma around mental health. So, that we let others know that they're not alone. So a lot of impact there. So today I am really excited to have J.R. Martinez, who is an Army veteran. He is an actor. He is a best-selling author. He's a national speaker. And some of you may also know that he was the winner of the season 13 Dancing with the Stars. What does this man not do? He's out of this world. So JR is going to join me. Here we go.
Just want to, just thank the Mental Health Coalition for starting this Project 121. Essentially, when you're thinking about how does, the name Project 121 come up, it's very simple. It's, everyone needs to talk to someone. 121, Project 121. It's very simple, very cool. And I think it's just one of those things that if there's nothing you walk away with from what I'm going to share, I know Tyler's going to share. We're going to have Jason Phillips going to jump in later as well, who's going to offer a lot of insight and kind of like coming from that expert, point of view. Just remember that 121 component, that number. Just remember that everyone needs to talk to someone. Right. Just walk away with that, man. Just that's the most pure and simple thing that you can do. And so, it really is great to be here, with you and have this conversation because it's incredibly important. And I think what's great, Tahlia, is for those that are on right now, I see, someone saying, what's up from LA, holla, holla. But what's really great about for those that are on right now, looking at the two of us, is that oftentimes I'm going to be the one, if you and I are on a live together or walking down the street together, I'm going to be the one that's going to get the most recognition. I'm going to be the one that's going to get the most love. I'm going to be the one that people are going to be like, yo, thank you for your service. And you're standing right next to me and they'll just kind of like gloss right over you. And it's not even about a female thing. I mean, it is, but it's just about because they don't see the scars on your body.
Right.
And they don't even realize what you're dealing with and what you have dealt with and what you had to go through emotionally and mentally to get to where you are, just to be able to walk down that street. And so I think it's my responsibility to actually say, hey, to that individual that may say to me, JR, thank you for your service. Well, hold on. She served as well, or he served as well. Let's throw some love to him and her because they have done the same amount of stuff that I have done. So it's really great to have this conversation and to really expand on that, man.
And JR, that you bring up such a great point and you and I have talked about this previously. What does a veteran look like? What does somebody who struggles with anxiety or PTSD look like? I think that we all, just like the military, we all look very different. We all have different experiences. We all have very different jobs. And I think that can be really relatable to those out there who have not served. I think that one thing that we have in common with everybody is or with a lot of populations is the fact that veterans, who are affected by anxiety and PTSD, it manifests in very similar ways. We're all human. Right. And those of us who are dealing with trauma and anxiety are going to experience it the same way that somebody else who may not have served may have experienced, who may experience anxiety and trauma. So I'm curious, JR, like, in your mental wellness journey, I'd love to know about, some of the physical feelings that resulted in, mental wellness challenges for you that may have been a result of your service, that may have been, something that is built up over time. But what did that look like for you?
Thank you for setting that up, Talia. I think one of the most important things to really touch on and highlight is I acknowledge, I understand now at this stage in my life, one, that it is a journey, right? It really is a journey. And phases of the journey end, but then other phases begin. But this emotional and mental wellness component of the journey is always going to be, part of the journey. It's always going to be existent, right? It's always going to be happening. But in this journey that I have been on, one of the things that I learned that a lot of my trauma, yes, although a lot of it was related to what happened to me in Iraq 18 years ago, I started to unpack and realize that a lot of it started from before I was in the military.
Right.
Like I actually joined the military with some underlining trauma that I never talked about. One, because culturally within the Hispanic community, it's not something you do. It's not something that as men you're conditioned to do, to talk about. My mother faced a lot of, I try to be careful with the word when I say someone dealt with their trauma, because unfortunately in my mother's case, she has not dealt with it. She's faced it, she's experienced it, she hasn't dealt with it, right? She hasn't gotten to that place yet. And so for me, it's one of those things that when I look back, I realized there was so much trauma that my mother experienced, but that she projected onto me. Then I experienced my own trauma in my childhood. So when I joined the military, I was coming with that baggage. I mean, and if you think about that, that's symbolic of any phase of life, any relationship we go into, whether it's an organization like the military, whether it's a job, whether it's with a partner, whether it's with a friend, whether it's with, children, whatever, you're always coming into it with something. And I didn't realize when I joined the military, I was bringing something with me. And it wasn't until after I was injured that all of a sudden this was the final straw that now pushed me to this place of like just completely feeling like I can't do this. This is overwhelming because my physical journey, as you and I talked, a few days ago, my physical journey was challenging. Of course, I'm not going to take that away from myself or anybody else that hasn't endured that. But I can tell you that my emotional and mental journey has been even more difficult. And I'm still on that journey right now. To the point that we all know, and Talia, you know this, the number of veterans that unfortunately take their lives every single day, it fluctuates. The point is, it's more than one. It's up to 22, 20, 19, 18. It's more than one. That's one too many. And I think about my life and how these moments where I almost I put myself in those scenarios where I could have easily have taken my own life. And it was because I was having a difficult time connecting that very thing that I had found in the military that I loved. And what it was service. I fell in love with this idea of service, and that started to become my purpose as a young 19-year-old. That was my identity, that all of a sudden at 19, when I was injured, not only was my identity physically, the way I appeared was taken away from me, but my identity of being someone in uniform was taken away. So then I was like, well, how am I ever going to continue to fulfill this element and notion of wanting to be of service and to impact other people? I won't be able to do it. And I was able, luckily, to find different avenues by just talking to veterans in the burn ward and visiting with them and
Mm-hmm.
just literally showing up and listening, that it started to evolve into something else. And I started to connect. Okay, cool. That is, there's my ability to serve. There's my purpose right there. And I started tapping into all of that. And then all of a sudden, I got involved with nonprofit and I started doing that work. But what I noticed, Talia, is that when I started doing this work on behalf of veterans,
Mm-hmm.
I was doing it, yeah, because I cared genuinely at the bottom of my heart.
Yep.
But it was my lifeline. It was the thing that was keeping me above water. And if I wasn't doing that, if I wasn't on doing an interview or at an event speaking or talking to troops and their families, and I was isolated by myself, guess what? I was just sinking. And I would get to this point where I would cry and scream and yell, and I would,
Mm-hmm.
why? Because I started creating these narratives in my head of, I'm 20 years old. Why aren't girls talking to me? I'm 20 years old. Why aren't people giving me an opportunity? I'm 20 years old. Why are kids, the innocent children, staring at me and looking at me because they don't understand what they're looking at? But I'm interpreting it differently because I have not healed emotionally. And I started to identify those things. And luckily, you know, it really came down to my best friend, who was a 20-year Air Force veteran, one
Hey.
day sitting me down and saying, you know, listen, man, you got to talk. There's a lot of stuff that it was therapy for me. I see somebody said it was therapeutic. It was absolutely, it was therapeutic for me. But it was one of those things where if I was doing that work, I was happy and I was content.
Mm.
But I needed to learn how to do it for me in moments of silence when I was just with myself. You know, when we hear intimacy, when we listen to the word intimacy, we immediately, most of us, go to this place of being intimate with a partner. And for me, it was like, no, I needed to learn how to be intimate with myself. And all of us, that's the first step, is learning how to be intimate with yourself. Once you're able to establish that intimacy with yourself, then guess what? Every other relationship you fall into, professional or personal, now you're going to be able to understand those emotions, those feelings that you're having, and that whoever is in front of you is having as well.
Yeah. And you bring up such a good point. I mean, sometimes it is often the toughest battle that we face, and in, you know, coming to terms with the fact that we need to talk about it, that we need to reach out. There have been so many points in my mental wellness journey where I just said, if I can just, you know, if I can get over this panic attack, I'm fine. You know, I'll be fine. If I can just like make it another day, I'll be okay. I don't need help. I can get through this. And by doing that, I realized the very hard way that my life was starting to just slowly unravel and get more and more difficult. So, and maybe some of you here can relate to that. One thing that's just so terrible about anxiety, about PTSD, is if you don't get on top of it, it starts to spread to every other area of your life. To the point where, you know, for at least for me, my personal experience, I couldn't go to the grocery store without feeling deeply anxious. I was one time on a flight back to New York City, and flight attendants had to treat me as an in-flight emergency when I had a panic attack and passed out. Anxiety spreads to every area of your life if you don't get on top of it. So that's one thing that I really hope that everybody that I speak to can take away, is to get on top of it ASAP. Yeah. Have that conversation with yourself. And I know I'll save a lot of this conversation for when we bring Jason in, because Jason can really bring a lot of that professional nuance in as well. One thing, JR, that you mentioned that I'm really touched by is the fact that you healed. You were able to heal, and part of your healing journey was by helping others. That is just, I mean, in addition to, and this is not to butter you up, you know, I adore you, but in addition to how much of a hero that you already are to everybody, the fact that you know, went that, I mean, the extra mile by wanting to help people through your healing journey, through something that was already very difficult, is just incredible. And I mean, wow. I mean, that just speaks so much volume about you as a person, to your character. You know, speaking about my healing journey, you know, going back to a little bit about how I got there, you know, what brought me to that point. You know, for me, a little background about my job. I was a linguist. I worked pretty emotional missions, and I won't get too in the weeds. I feel like a lot of people work very emotional jobs, and a lot of people have very traumatic experiences, and anxiety is going to affect you the same way that it affects me. You know, you're going to feel you're going to feel immense stress. It's going to become physical. I feel like, you know, even though, you know, we have this military experience that's very different from those who haven't served, the way that anxiety manifests is similar in a lot of people. You know, some people get that racing heart. They get, you know, for me, oh my goodness. I mean, I feel like I had every symptom under the sun. You know, eventually I started to pass out because of my anxiety. I would get cold hands and feet. My hearing would, you know, I would get tinnitus or tinnitus. I never know how to pronounce it. But I would get, you know, like vision problems. Anxiety and stress affect you in such an intense way. So, you know, for me, it was really like that moment on the flight. It was realizing that, oh my gosh, my life is not really enjoyable when you think about it. I'm having trouble with friends, with family, with work. Like my performance is suffering. And that was kind of like the breaking point for me. And I think that if we can avoid, if we can have these conversations, if we can talk about our mental health and our healing journey and break that stigma down, maybe people won't have to get to that breaking point where they're fainting on airplanes, where like, and JR, gosh, I mean, worst case scenario, a lot of people that we know devastatingly have taken their lives because they just can't handle it anymore. So I think, it is incredibly important for us to just continue this conversation, to reach out, to notice changes in ourselves, and in those around us. So that's
on that point, Tahlia, when you started by saying, how I wanted to try to influence other people and affect other people, right, in a positive way. For me, what I discovered in that I think a lot of people have not discovered completely yet is that when you show up to help somebody else, your intention is to help them, right? And a lot of people prevent themselves from getting into that space because they think, well, what's in it for me? As a young 20-year-old, I was putting myself in that space to talk to these patients and their families, not necessarily understanding what I can do for them. I was just like, well, I'm just going to show face and listen to them. And, maybe they'll share stuff and they'll get things off of their chest. What I then quickly realized is what they were doing for me. They were actually allowing me to discover this element of service again through, because I had this very naive and narrow point of view of thinking service, because my short time in the military, service meant I had to wear this BDU uniform, right, on my body, and I had to walk around with this weapon that I was issued by the United States military. That's the way I served. I had to go through some other country. I had to go through some mission, some trauma thing that was happening, and I was going to be a part of a unit that was going to help fix it. But in this particular case, it was like, well, then what's my new uniform? What's my new weapon? What's the new situation? What's the task? What's the mission? And what I quickly learned was that my scars are my uniform. My weapon are the words that come out of my mouth, the way that I maneuver through different spaces, how I'm willing to show up. And what I quickly discovered is through visiting these patients in the hospital, that's when I started understanding, oh, I can serve in a very completely different capacity and probably be more impactful than I ever could have been had I remained in the military. My journey, when my best friend talked to me after, 3 years of getting out of the military, almost 3 years after I got out, that was the starting point, right? That wasn't that wasn't it. That wasn't the moment, okay, everything changed in my life. I started seeing change immediately where things started to improve, but I wasn't where I needed to be. It just allowed me to understand that, one, I can cry in front of another man. I can, be vulnerable with somebody else that isn't blood to me, because that's what we also believe. I can't talk to somebody that's not blood. And I can be vulnerable, and this individual is going to still love me unconditionally and just be there for me. And whatever I needed to share, he was going to be there to embrace that and welcome that and encourage that. But that wasn't the only incident that I had. I had many incidents after that where I finally, one of my good friends who was injured in the military. I mean, one of the toughest dudes, like, and he was always like, talking ish, you know what I'm saying? And, love the guy for it, right? And literally to the point where one day he calls me out of the blue and he's like, man, guess what I did? I was like, what? He's like, I went to see a therapist. And I was like, what? You did? Like, you above all, you did it? And he was like, yeah. And all of a sudden I was like, I'm gonna go reach out to somebody too. Because if he did it, I guess I should do it too, right? Because there's some feelings inside of me that I feel like my chemical balance isn't lined up. We all know when we're not feeling right. We all know when we're not showing up. And to your point, it's almost equivalent to like when we all buy a house or buy something that we really like, right? And very few of us have the ability to just go in and buy it as straight cash, homie, and then walk out and never have to worry about a payment again. That's not the reality for most of the people in this world. Most of us have payments that we have to, right? To be able to obtain that thing that we love and like so much. Well, that's the same concept of life and your mental health. You don't just make one payment and everything goes away. You don't just have one conversation and everything's okay now. You have to continuously have those conversations. You have to continuously make those payments and to be able to show up, because that's when you start to work towards obtaining that thing that you may not understand clearly at this very moment what the benefits of that gift is going to be, but I guarantee you it's going to be incredibly worth it. And so I just want people to understand that, hey, you may have talked to somebody, or you may talk to somebody after this. You may talk to somebody next week. Do not let it end there. It does not end there. You're going to have to talk to somebody again 2 months from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 6 years from now. This is a journey. And I think the most important thing to highlight with this, Project 121 and Mental Health Coalition is having 30 days. I mean, 31 days of, lives of people from all walks of life talking about their mental health journey, because there's a story out there for everybody to connect with. My wife, I'll tell you this, my wife, love her, right? Love my wife to death. We're expecting right now. We have a 9-year-old. We're expecting, due in a couple of months. Yeah, like we're.
I'll just throw that out there. Yay, we're having.
It's not mine. It's not mine though.
Oh, it's not yours though. Oh my gosh. Well, we got another go to therapy for, JR.
Yeah, no. When are you expecting? What do you do?
I'm due in October. I'm almost 6 months. So like I'm just showing and I'm like feeling all the things, but congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations to you as well. You're going to be going through the pretty much the summer and the humidity in Florida in that pregnancy. That's going to be tough.
Already hot, yeah.
Yeah, my wife is already walking around like in Austin, and she's like, oh, yeah, so uncomfortable, like, yeah. But, my wife, I love her to death. My wife has experienced trauma, right? But not in the same sense of what I've experienced, and a lot of people maybe on this live have experienced. In 2012, her younger sister, 17 years old, unexpectedly passes away. No cause, no reason, no nothing, just unexpectedly passes away. Right? So now my wife is accustomed to the day before. We had this amazing experience. We were at this event in LA. I was the grand marshal for the Rose Parade in Los Angeles. And I mean, we were like on top of the world. My in-laws were with us in LA. And then the next day we get a call that she's passed away. So my wife now has taken that experience, and when she's always having something positive happening in her day, in her life, she's waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? She's waiting, because I remember this feeling. I remember that when I was so happy, I can't be too happy because something will happen. So now she has this anxiety. Well, guess what? It went untreated, right? She didn't deal with it, because then the baby, our daughter came, 4 months, 5 months later. And so then she's busy with motherhood, right? But all of that was just underlining, just living there. Well, then my father-in-law, who's 27 years NYPD, I mean, this guy was decorated, police officer in NYPD. That was his identity. That was his baby girl that he felt like he couldn't save, because that's his job, is to serve and protect. He can't protect her. He loses her. Now he's like, I got to quit the job. I'm just not mentally in the right space. He steps away, which is probably the right thing to do. What he does not do is find a place for him to go and talk. The culture does not support that. So guess what? It's manifesting to the point where last year it takes his life. And we all said he literally died from a broken heart. And but the point of that is now here my wife is once again, 8 years later. We were in Austin, we were having a good time, just hanging out. The next day she gets a call. All of a sudden, my father-in-law's unconscious, he passes away. So once again, it's amplified. So finally I was like, you need to go and talk to somebody that's a professional that can help you navigate through these feelings, because what started to happen is not only fear, anxiety, she started to, she just always was she was always on that edge. Yeah. And she finally went and spoke to somebody. And I applaud her so much, and she's so brave, because when she went, I mean, she dove into it and went hard. And she was like doing twice a week, and which is really intense, and it's a lot to unpack. But she started getting these little tools and tips and tricks. My wife on a plane, which in our family, we fly a lot. We're always on a plane going somewhere. She's not the most comfortable on a plane. Even today, when we flew to New York, it got a little bumpy at a certain point. And I looked at our daughter and I was like, mommy is working hard right now to stay calm. But the thing is giving her permission to say, it's okay. It's okay for you not to necessarily be 100%. Not all of us are going to be 100%. How many of us, when we're driving our cars, going to where we want to go, can literally look at our gas tank and say our car is always at 100%? I know mine isn't. I know mine isn't. But what do? We have to make a conscious effort to
Mm,
stop every so often to refuel.
you
But
feel that.
we don't
Mm,
but we don't do that for ourselves. And so it's a matter of giving yourself little tools and tips and tricks. Give yourself a little GPS system that allows you to understand where help is. And this is something that you and I talked about. Um, and you and I talked about this as far as, just this element of understanding who you have in your circle.
yep.
I think that is something that is so important, especially in this last year where everybody's mental health is compromised.
Right.
It's important because what I did early on in my 20s, early 20s, when I was still trying to figure out what I was doing with my life and what life meant, if I felt a void, guess what? If I met Tahlia or if I met Dan, I would just go to you and expect you to fix everything in my life. You had to fulfill this, fulfill that, fulfill this, fulfill that. All this that had nothing to do with you. But I was
Hmm.
putting all this pressure because it was my cry for help. And what I finally learned as I started to gain a little bit more emotional intelligence is like, oh, not one person can do all things. So I started understanding I go to this person when I really need to dive deep about something. I go to this person when it's kind of more surface and just jokester and just having a good time. I go to this person. And I tell you something, I don't know about you, Talia, but that has been probably one of the most important things that I've been able to do with my relationship with my wife. I mean, that element of being vulnerable with her.
Yep.
I mean, that wasn't something I was conditioned to do. I mean, I just being vulnerable with my wife. It was easy for me to get on stage and talk, talk this and say that. But when I came home, when it was that close, that was hard for me.
Absolutely. And you touched on this, and I kind of want to talk a little bit about stigma, with respect, when we feel like, we can't open up, whether it be as an individual, we want to feel like the super people to our spouses, to our children, whether we feel pressure from our communities, whether you be a veteran, whether you, one of my good friends comes from an immigrant family and feels this need to be perfect. And, the model immigrant, we
Hmm.
hear stories of various communities and how they, are combating stigma, and how they're, how they are able to finally come to terms with the fact that I need to speak to somebody, I need to reach out. And I'm wondering, what do you think, how can somebody who may have the mentality of, I just can't, I gotta bottle this up, I gotta hide, I can't talk to anybody, what's a good step for somebody who may be feeling that way?
I think it's, it looks different for everybody, right? It doesn't have to be the way that you and I have learned that we can do it, which is by talking and sharing and being incredibly open about our experience without worrying about people's judgment. I mean, I honestly, I can come on this platform or any other platform and talk about me being 21, 22, 23, 24 years old, using alcohol as a way to cope and putting myself behind a wheel. And I'm not proud of those moments in my life. I am not proud of it at all. Being reckless. Like, I really did some reckless things. And it's hard for people that know me as the positive guy. Like, he's the guy that's so positive. And it's like, yeah, but I have to practice positivity every single day. And at that point, I wasn't doing that. And so, what I want people to understand is that at that point, I wasn't going to a therapist. I wasn't talking to anybody. That was before the conversation with my best friend. But you know what I was doing? Now, you can argue, is that effective or not, right? I get that. But what I was doing is like, I'm not ready to talk about this openly, but what I will do is write.
Yep.
I will open up a notebook and I'll just dump it. I'll just let it out. And it wasn't necessarily me thinking of like, okay, this is going to be a part of a book one day, or this is going to be a part of, or making sure the grammar and the punctuation was right. No, I didn't care about any of that. I was just like dumping everything. And so what I want someone to do is like find the thing that speaks to you,
Hmm.
right? If you're not ready to go and talk to somebody, that's cool. You're fine. You're valid in those feelings, and take your time to get to that place. Right. Do yoga.
Hmm.
Um, do what I did. Go try to help somebody else. Do something for somebody else. The thing is like try to find something that allows you to be able to get stuff out. Don't keep it in. Whether it's, like I said, volunteering, whether it's working out, whether it's going on a walk. I would also get in my car and go for drives. And I would just go for drives, not necessarily worry about and think about where am I going. I was just like, I just need to have the windows down, and I just need to like just let the air hit me. And right. And the thing that I always kept reminding myself of, and I had to always bring it back to this point was JR, this isn't the end. This isn't the end, man. Like whatever you're feeling in this moment where you feel like there's no hope for you, this isn't it. And I would always go back to that moment. Remember, JR, when you were in that Humvee and you were literally burning alive and you felt like no one was ever going to be able to save you and you were going to die. And the only thing that kept me alive was just holding on to hope of believing that someone would come and pull me out. And eventually someone did. And that's what I kept building off of, right? Like that's what I kept holding on to, is this notion of, okay, I remember that moment, that really intense moment in my life when I was going through a traumatic event, that I just held on because it couldn't be it. And I just kept applying that to every time that I had this moment of feeling like I'm isolated and just out of touch and there's no opportunity. Just hold on, man. Just hold on, because I'm, and I have done that so much, Talia, as I'm sure you have as well, that it's gotten me to the point in my life where I now, and when I am faced with something, I don't sit here and say, why did this happen to me? And now I'm conditioned and able to look at the scenario and say, what am I supposed to be learning from this? Because this is probably the second or third or fourth or fifth time that this has appeared. So what am I missing that I need to start paying attention to?
That's incredible, JR. And I think, now that we're talking about the heavy stuff, I feel like now's a perfect time to bring Jason in. Jason, where are you at, my friend? Let's see if I can send him an invite.
And while he's coming on, for those of you, Jason Phillips, he is a licensed therapist, a lecturer, a life coach, has extensive experience with trauma and working with veterans, active duty service members. And here he is. What's up, Jason? Thanks for joining, man.
What's up, JR? Hey, Tahlia, you guys, I was sitting here taking notes myself. This is an amazing conversation. So I just want to reiterate what you all talked about as far as, PTSD, anxiety, and just getting it out. JR, you mentioned that once you found out one of your battles was seeking help, you feel like, hey, I need to seek help too. And I think there's a big misconception that we can just like muster through a lot of things and like we can get up, go to work, we're doing okay, but we're really not. We're really not.
Yeah, there's this notion, right, Jason, that as individuals we're like, well, I got this. I can go through this alone. But we're not meant to go through things alone, right? Especially if we're going to kind of isolate a certain group of individuals, the military. We talked about how in the military, you're a part of a team. And what do they always tell you? Your commanders are always telling you, in order to defeat the enemy, whatever the enemy is, for that day, for that week, for that month, for that deployment, you have to, as a team, talk to each other, as a team, rely on one each other, as a team, help each other get through that. Why is it, Jason, have you experienced that suddenly when service members now get out of that environment, out of that organization, they're like, I'm going to do it on my own. Suddenly they forget, oh, there was this team component that allowed me to survive those missions. Maybe I should try to implement the same thing in this world.
Yeah, JR, great question. What I've found is that, working with veterans and soldiers is that the help is not sought out until the very end of the career, the end of the contract. For veterans, it's until they, lost a lot of things. Maybe jobs have failed, relationships have failed, divorces have happened. And now they say, well, you know what? Maybe let me seek some help. As opposed to getting the help early so you can stay in the fight a lot longer and just be healthier.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I think about is in the service, like when you're serving, there are so many barriers to getting help. And this, I feel still, the Air Force is the best job I ever had. And I am very fond of my experience. So I want to kind of caveat with that. But I do think that at least when I was serving, it may have changed a little bit now. there were so many barriers. And of course, many were self-imposed. You know, I wanted to be this perfect, you know, the model woman, and I wanted to not come off as weak, and I wanted to not come off as emotional. So I didn't seek help for that reason. But I was also told, you know, I was in military intelligence, and I was told, if you get help, you'll lose your badge. You will probably never work in intelligence again. So I'm wondering, you know, JR, do you think there's a way that we can start talking about, like, how can we make it better for veterans who are currently serving to get that help, to kind of break down the stigma for people who may be facing that, whether it be, you know, like we talked about the other day, that rub dirt in it mentality, you know, be a man, you know, just continue to stick it out. Like, how do we overcome, you know, stuff like that? Is this at a policy level? I mean, not to get too in the weeds, but like, where does it even start?
Well, I think one, what we're doing right now, I think that's a big component of it, because whether we know it or not, there's probably going to be a family member of somebody who is on active duty right now, or is in the reserve or National Guard, or somebody that is now a veteran, is out of the military, or there may be somebody on right now that maybe hasn't dropped it in the comments, but you know, they just kind of sitting back and observing and taking it all in. But I think the important thing to do is allow this platform, which is why it's a huge shout out again to the Mental Health Coalition, Kenneth Cole, of creating this platform and this movement of getting more people to talk about their experiences, because not everybody's going to click with me, and not everybody's going to relate and resonate with what I'm sharing, but they probably will resonate with what you're sharing, Tahlia, Jason, what you're sharing. And so I think you need more stories. That's the point of what I'm saying. You need more people getting out there talking about it, right? We need more platforms that are going to highlight and actually welcome this conversation, so that way other people can hear this and say, okay, there's no judgment there. There's a safe space. Okay, maybe I should open up a little bit and talk about my own experience. We do need everybody that's on here that also has never served in the military, has no connection to the military. We need you to become a true ally, not just an ally when it's convenient. Not an ally when Memorial Day comes around, when 4th of July comes around, when Veterans Day comes around, when you hear about something happening to a service member and the challenges they're going through. No, we need you as an ally 365, because I believe that the military's voices in many ways are sort of kind of, you know, silenced to some degree, right? Like, we don't feel, how are we going to reach people? How are we going to get our voices and our stories out there? But if we can have most of America saying, hey, we support you and this matters, even though it's not something that comes to our doorstep, it matters to us, then guess what? Now we can put the pressure on politicians. Now we can put the pressure on the military. Now we can put the pressure on the VA and say there has to be accountability. We have to do a better job of showing up. So I believe that we do need individuals that are willing to actually be a voice for us, because not every service member is able to, one, share, doesn't, because of their military service and their agreement within the military, but also at the same time, you know, they're not ready to do that. So I just think we need other people as well to actually be allies.
That's,
yeah.
yep.
And I'll say to Nikki, for resources for vets watching, I'll share a couple. One is the crisis line, and I'll type it in there, but it's 800-273-TALK, and I'll type it in the chat so everybody can get that. Also, another resource for veterans is NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. That's for veterans and family members who are dealing with somebody or have someone in their family with a mental health issue. One more, and I'll type this in the chat, is a podcast from Dr. Thema. Excellent resource, so you can have somewhere to go, something to listen to, and also the crisis line gives you somebody to talk to if you feel like you're alone and you need that resource.
Right.
And I also want to put in a plug for the Headstrong Project, which is the organization that truly, I mean it, saved my life. Free, stigma-free mental health care for veterans. I reached out to the Headstrong Project about, oh my goodness, is it 3 years already? Reached out to them 3 years ago at truly the breaking point. And Nikki just dropped in the chat their handle there. It's at Get Headstrong. Please give them a follow. Also give Mental Health Coalition a follow.
Yes.
Headstrong Project truly has saved so many lives. And I believe, I think I'm still right, but as of last October, every veteran coming into the Headstrong Project who received care They have not lost a single person to taking their life, which is unbelievable. They specialize in EMDR therapy. Again, free mental health care for veterans. I got a call back in 24 hours and I was seeing a therapist within a week. It was unreal. So if there's a vet out there that really needs some help, please reach out to Headstrong, reach out to Military One Source, which is great. Jason just mentioned that. Military One Source is great for active duty. Jason, can you remind me, is Military One Source good for vets too, or is that mostly active duty?
I believe mostly active duty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Great resource.
Yeah, there's, I mean, the thing is that there's, which can be, it's kind of like the advertisement space, right? It's incredibly saturated when it comes to nonprofits that are set up to actually assist service members, right? I mean, there's over, I think a couple of years ago, I remember seeing it was like over 47,000 organizations that are set up to assist service members. I mean, that's incredible, but that's also one of those things where for anybody that wants to get involved in Google's, they're going to be overwhelmed and inundated with so much information. They're like, well, where's the need? What's important? What matters? And so what we want is we want people to be able to like focus in on, we need to move into this space of mental health. We need to be supporting organizations that are, responding to Tahlia within 24 hours and then within a week are putting them in a safe environment, right? I saw someone said, hey, I've been taking care of myself this last year. I've been in isolation. And it's like, okay, I get that. I get that that's taking care of yourself. But I think like everything in life, it's important to, you got to approach everything within moderation, right? So it's like you look at that and you're like, I'm taking care of myself, but just kind of, just doing me. But it's also, you don't want to find yourself being too isolated where, now you're not talking to other people. You're not connecting with other people. Because Jason mentioned something that is so important. We got to show love to the family members too. There are family members that every day might feel like they're walking on eggshells every single day because they don't know, how do I speak to my loved one? How do I speak to this person that I know? I don't know what I'm saying. And so they should equally seek assistance and figure out where are some resources for me that allows me to be able to get the tools that I need in order to be able to communicate with this person that I love. For the family members to say, hey, listen, where do we go as well? And we equally, we might not, and Jason, would you say the family members, it's almost like you can go and be a part of this healing journey even without the service member initially?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I see a question too, how can we support friends with PTSD? And I would also include family in that question too. So there's a couple of things that we can do to support family and friends with PTSD. One is give them grace. So I'll share a personal story. I have a family member who is managing PTSD, and we went out to, I went to visit her, and then we went to a crowded restaurant. This was before COVID. And I noticed that, I could tell she was a little bit more anxious, a little more, watchful, because again, it was a packed restaurant. But we still, like, she wanted to sit in a certain area, and I had no problem with that. We still ate. We had a great time. The next time I went to visit, she declined to go out to eat at that restaurant. She said, no, I'll just pass. I didn't take that personal. I was very thankful that she showed up the first time, that we still had a great time the first time. Sometimes when people cancel on us or when they're a little bit agitated or moody, we think we're doing something wrong or that person's, they're acting a little different, and we don't give them the same grace and compassion that we would if we knew what was going on. So someone who's managing any mental health issue, whether that's PTSD, anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, we as family and friends, we don't need to know the ins and outs and the details of what they're going through. But what we do, we must support them, still give them the same love, grace, compassion that we would want if we were dealing with something. Yeah. As we all know, when you're going through something, you don't always want to share with every and anybody what you're going through internally. But to know that, Tahlia cares, JR cares, that means a lot. So just giving them that compassion and support goes a very long way.
That's so kind. And that really brings me back, Jason, to some of the times when I had such bad social anxiety, my anxiety like grew into social anxiety, which I had never had in the past. And I stopped when I would go, literally, I'll never forget, I was in Trader Joe's one day and I was like picking out broccoli and I felt like I was going to faint and I was just going to pass out. So for me, that kind of step to whenever I would go grocery shopping, I would get, it would come back. The body has this, I hear that it lives in the limbic system, and your body kind of has this like, kind of short circuits to panic or to anxiety to protect you and to save your life, really. So I started to not want to go out, and I started not want to go places. And one of the kindest things that my husband did, and my friends did for me, was to kind of meet me where I was. Let's have a dinner party at our place. Let's do something maybe a little bit more low key. Let's stick around your neighborhood. And that meant the world to me. And eventually I did get better. It was kind, and it really helped me in my journey to have people show up for me, and to know, just to have the knowledge that people still loved me, cared about me, wanted to be around me. And eventually, now I'm truly back to my old self. I'd say I am like 100%, and that's all thanks to therapy. But if you can meet people where they are, and that's a huge part in helping them in their healing journey. That's one way how you can show up for somebody who may be going through treatment. So I love that, Jason.
And I'll share, with my wife, coping with the loss of her father unexpectedly last year. There were certain things that, were triggers for her as well. And I found myself, to be completely honest, and I'll just, share here that I know that sometimes I wasn't showing up in the best way for her. I know that sometimes I was more like, oh, come on. Like, I was busy. There was things going on, and where I was just kind of like, I got things to do, like whatever. Right. And, but I would always try to bring myself to this place where if she wanted to talk, we'd sit down, and no matter if it was in the middle of my day and things were hectic, and we'd have a conversation. Right. But what I realized is that I needed to actually be willing to take care of myself too. So it wasn't that I didn't care and I didn't care what she was going through. It was the fact that, that I also too maybe needed to take care of myself, that I wasn't really taking care of myself to be able to show up for her. So as much as I wanted to show up for her, I needed to look after me too. Mm-hmm. And so what I started doing is like, I started trying to get back into a routine where in the morning after I dropped off our daughter at school, I'd go to the park with the pups, and we just walk around, and I would just literally it was like almost like a walking form of like meditation, right? Like I would just walk, and it was like trees, and it was beautiful weather, and I would just sit there and I would watch the pups, and dogs are a great form of therapy and love, and I would just watch them, and I would be able to come back home, and if she was like, oh, I had this dream, or I had this thought, or this experience, or somebody said this, I was able to sit down and be like, okay, cool, it's all right, whatever, and meet her where she was. And so, again, I'll acknowledge I didn't always show up the best, but I realized, oh, it's because I'm overwhelmed with the world as it is. And now I'm having to show up for my wife when she needs me, and I should be able to show up. Well, I'm not able to show up if I'm not taking care of me. So self-care is something that, it doesn't mean you're selfish. It just means that you understand what's important, and you got to pull yourself away to give yourself what you need in order to better show up for somebody else. So if you're out there and you have somebody in your circle that, is going through a challenging time, and you're trying to show up for them, and sometimes you feel like they're not, I can't, we're not getting anywhere, we're not making any progress, I just ask you to just continue to show up, but continue to pull away and do the thing that replenishes your soul, because you have the great intention. You just don't want to get burnt out if you're not taking care of yourself. And then guess what? Then all of a sudden you become impatient. Then you don't want to show up for that person. Then if God forbid something happens to that individual, now you live with that because you think to yourself, I could have done so much more. So it's important everything in life is a balance. I know it's difficult, but it's important to have a balance.
Right.
Yeah. I want to add to that, JR, just saying, like, when we show up for ourselves first, we can show up for other people in a healthier way. So if you're caregiving, or if you're managing your own mental health issues, when you're dealing with somebody else, you're not going to be as snappy. You're not going to be as irritable. And you can show up with the love and compassion that person needs, because as we know, when somebody is helping us, but it feels forced, then we don't even want the help. But when we feel the genuineness from them, we're like, okay, yeah, I'll tell you everything that I have going on. But if it becomes more of a conflict, then we say, look, I don't even want to deal with it.
Right.
So take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the the biggest thing is that we just need more people sharing stories. And so, even though that we're coming to this point of where, May is coming to an end, we're now moving into June, and Mental Health Awareness Month is technically what people would say is over. Yes, the month of May is, but we need people to understand that this is something that literally rolls out throughout the rest of the year. This is something that is continuous. It happens in June, July, August. The same soundbite that you hear from veterans, that Veterans Day shouldn't just be limited to November 11th because veterans serve every single day. The same thing should apply in this conversation regarding mental health. This is something that people are dealing with every single day. And so, even though we're going to roll into June and roll into the summer, let's continue, and Jason, I'm curious about this. What are your thoughts? Because one of the things that the way I've looked at with respect to people that have been affected greatly by COVID in the last year, whether they've lost someone or really been affected financially, and there's just a lot of other elements of it. I looked at the last year as an opportunity. And I looked at it as, okay, an opportunity for me to kind of recenter, me kind of get back to what it is that matters to me. What do I want to do? Really kind of understand where I am in life and what I want to do. And when we come out on the other side of this, right? And versus I think a lot of people, because we're so afraid of actually looking within, having that intimate relationship with ourselves, we're looking for distraction. And I feel like, and I have challenged people, don't come out of this pandemic when the world opens back up. Don't come out of this and feel like, oh man, I didn't utilize the time that I had that was given to all of us to look within and do a lot of that intimate work. What is it for you, Jason, that you have experienced why people are constantly looking for distraction, and how do you get them to stop focusing on this thing that distracts you and actually sit down and pause and look within?
Well, as we know, with anxiety and trauma, PTSD included, avoidance is a really good short-term solution. So, like, especially when you're in the military and you have all of these missions and you're deploying here, you're training here, you're TDY, like, you're just so busy. Like, you can even sign up for more things to keep you busy.
Right.
So that's the way our lives were going before COVID. We were all, we were booked, busy, all of that stuff. So when COVID stopped, or when COVID hit and we had to slow down, the avoidance was no longer there. We couldn't avoid. So now we were forced to look at our lives, to look at our relationships, to look at our careers in a way that we've never been forced to look at them before. And if you didn't want to, but you were forced to, as you know, that's like if you go to the pool and you don't want to get in and somebody pushes you in, it's like, whoa. So that's what happened to us with our lives. So with COVID, it really forced us to take a really hard, in-depth look at how we're doing and how we're managing our own internal stuff. For some of us, we loved it. It was a great opportunity to reset. For some of us, it really forced us to do that internal work. So I think a lot of us are still going to come out better on the other side. It's just some of us wanted to, and some of us were more forced to.
Mm. Oh man, I feel like what Jason just said is like just money. Like, what else can we share after that, Tahlia?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, just, follow Mental Health Coalition, follow Get Headstrong Project, continue to do the work, have these conversations, tell these stories. Thank you so much for joining us today. What an impactful, what a wonderful conversation. JR, Jason, so good to be with you both tonight.
Thank you both. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to be here. First of all, thank you, Jason, for your service, because I know even though you traditionally don't serve in the military the way that we did, you're serving veterans and you're serving family members and service members. And so thank you for putting yourself in that space. Tahlia, thank you so much for your willingness to be vulnerable, to be a strong woman, to put a face to what a female veteran looks like and how it can continue to look like. And congratulations on motherhood. And October is going to be coming pretty fast. I'm telling you, it happens fast. But again, yeah, right. But again, I want to echo, what you said, Tahlia. Just give mad love to Kenneth Cole, mad love to Mental Health Coalition, mad love to everybody that has been a part of the conversation the whole month of May, the whole team at the Mental Health Coalition as well for putting this together and, connecting all of us. And so thank you guys so much. And I just want to remind everybody that, you know, that the 31st Memorial Day, what it really is about. Yes, I know, understand it's a long weekend. It's an opportunity to go to the pool, depending on your weather, where you are. It's an opportunity to be with friends and family. It's an opportunity to take advantage of a sale. I get all of that. But let's, in that moment, because I believe that that's what you should be doing. I believe that you should be actually enjoying your life and your freedom, because that's those individuals that pay the ultimate price. That's what they would want you to do. But in the midst of all of that, I want you to pause. I want you to pick up your favorite drink. Right now, mine is water, but I want you to pick up your favorite drink. I want you to give a toast to the men and women that have actually paid that ultimate price, to the families that struggle every single day with the loss of that loved one. I want you to actually look up organizations where you can get involved to support the family members. I want you to take a moment of silence. I want you to do that. I want you to go on social media, and I want you to tell your friends, hey, let's all have fun. But today, let's stop for a second, even for a second. Let's stop and let's remember what this day is really about. And then we can get into thanking Tahlia and JR for their service after that, after, you know, Memorial Day. But again, if you have somebody that is going through their own experience right now, I'm not going to say issues, because issues immediately has this negative association, right? They're going through their own experiences, because all of us have them. Just be patient. Do some homework. Look for resources. Call that hotline. Figure, you know, that Jason dropped in the chat, right? 1-800-273-TALK. Hit them up. Find some resources for yourself. Take care of you, because if we take care of ourselves, we're able to better show up for other people. And I guarantee you, if you think that things are okay and that, oh, I'm functioning just fine, there are moments, there are things that maybe no one's telling you quite yet, but they're there, and it's happening, and it's potentially getting to somebody. It's affecting somebody in a negative way. So let's all just roll up our sleeves. Let's continue to have this conversation. Let's continue to expose our hearts, but more importantly, know and understand that other people are willing to embrace that thing and actually, like, you know, treat it with love and care, and pump some blood back into it, and give some life to more people. So it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you guys so much. I really feel like we should do this every day. I feel like every day we should have these conversations on IG, baby. And let's get more people to be a part of this conversation. And just want to thank everybody that, you know, tuned in for a portion of this or for the entire portion of this. Thank you so much for actually rapping with us for the last hour.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
everybody.
Peace and love to you all.